about 5 months, I went to the same gym at the same time every night. That was the whole reason it happened. I was 22, living in a small apartment by myself, and trying to get back into some kind of routine after dropping a semester of classes. I worked afternoons at a print shop, usually until 6:30, and after that I had way too much time to think. Going to the gym gave me structure. I would get home, change, eat something quick, and drive to a 24-hour gym about 10 minutes away. Most nights I got there between 8:45 and 9. It was not a huge gym, just one of those local places with rows of treadmills up front, weight machines in the middle, and free weights in the back. There were locker rooms off a short hallway near the desk, and because it was a smaller place, you started recognizing the same people after a while. There was an older guy who always used the elliptical and jeans, a woman who came in every night with over-ear headphones and did exactly 40 minutes on the stair machine, and a younger guy who filmed every set he did, like he was training for some sponsorship that was never coming. Then there was the man I started noticing near the lockers. The first time I really paid attention to him, I was coming out of the locker room after changing, and he was standing by the water fountain looking at the wall of day-use lockers. He was maybe mid-30s, solid build, short dark hair, plain black hoodie. Nothing memorable about him except that he seemed to be standing there without doing anything. No gym bag, no bottle, no towel. Still, it did not seem strange enough to matter. People wait for friends. They forget things in the locker room. They zone out. The next night, I saw him again. Same spot. Not exactly at the fountain this time, but close enough that I noticed. He looked up as I came out, then looked away immediately. That was the kind of thing that makes you aware of someone even when they technically have done nothing. After that, I started seeing him more. Not every night. That was what made it harder to trust my instincts. If he had been there every single time I arrived, I think I would have reacted faster. Instead, it was just enough to feel like overlap. Monday, he was on a bench near the locker hall. Wednesday, he was wiping down a machine he had not actually used. Friday, he was standing by the front desk, pretending to read a supplement ad on the bulletin board. He never spoke to me. Not at first. The first actual interaction happened because of my locker. The gym had about 20 small lockers by the entrance to each locker room. They were first come, first served, and people usually used whatever was open. I always picked one on the top row near the end, because the bottom row was awkward, and one of the middle lockers had a broken latch. It was not something I thought about, just habit. One night, I came out after my workout, and he was standing in front of that exact locker. Mine. The door was still shut, and I knew I had locked it, but he was standing close enough that I had to say something. "Sorry," I said. "That one's mine." He stepped aside right away and said, "I know." I remember just looking at him for a second. Then he nodded toward the padlock and added, "You use that one almost every night." He said it casually, like he was pointing out the weather. I laughed a little because I did not know how else to respond and said, "I guess." Then I unlocked it, took my stuff out, and left. The whole drive home, that sentence stayed with me. "You use that one almost every night." It was not threatening. That was what made it so easy to dismiss. It just sounded too familiar, too observant. After that, I started noticing more small things. Once, I came in later than usual, closer to 9:30, and he was already there near the cable machines. He looked genuinely surprised to see me, then checked the wall clock almost immediately. Another time, I skipped the gym for 3 days because I had a cold, and when I went back, he was at the sanitizing wipe station by the entrance. As I passed him, he said, "Haven't seen you in a while." Again, not aggressive, just enough that I felt myself become aware of how often he had apparently been noticing me. I changed my workout order after that. Instead of starting on the treadmill and then moving to weights, I went straight to the free weights and back. I also stopped using my usual locker and started carrying my keys and phone in the pockets of my joggers whenever I could. For about a week, it seemed to work. I barely saw him. Then one Thursday night, I went to the gym after work and realized I had forgotten my headphones at home. That threw me off more than it should have. Without them, I was more aware of everything around me. The clang of weights, the TVs overhead, random conversations, the desk scanner beeping every time someone entered. At around 9:20, I was on the seated row machine when I saw him in the mirror. He was standing near the hallway to the locker rooms, looking toward the floor area. Not moving, just standing there with his hands in the pocket of his hoodie. I looked away and finished the set. When I checked again in the mirror, he was still there. That was the first night I cut my workout short because of him. I went to the locker room, changed quickly, and came back out holding my keys in one hand. He was still near the hall. This time, as I passed him, he said, "You forgot your towel." I stopped. I had forgotten my towel. It was hanging over the hook inside the locker room by the sink. There was no reason he should have known that. He must have seen me leave it there or seen me come out without it. Either one meant he had been paying way closer attention than I wanted to think about. I did not say anything. I just turned around, went back inside, grabbed the towel, and left. The next day, I canceled my membership. Not dramatically. I just called the front desk and said my schedule had changed and I needed to end it. The girl at the desk sounded annoyed, but she processed it. That should have ended the whole thing. It did not. 3 nights later, I got home from work and found a gym towel draped over the handle of my apartment door. White. Cheap. The same kind the gym sold at the front desk. Folded inside it was one sheet of paper torn from a workout log booklet. It said, "You left too early Thursday?" Nothing else. No name. No explanation. Just that. I stood in the hallway staring at it long enough that my neighbor opened her door to take out trash and asked if I was okay. I said yes, but my voice came out wrong. What got to me was not just that he knew where I lived. It was that there was an obvious moment when he could have learned it. I never told him my name, never spoke to him long enough for anything like that, which meant he had either followed me from the gym before or watched me in the parking lot enough times to figure out my car, my plate, and eventually my building. I stayed with my sister for the next week. When I finally came back to the apartment, there was nothing else waiting. No note, no towel, nothing. But I never went back to that gym. And to this day, whenever I use a locker in any public place, I think about how long it would take someone to notice which one I usually choose. Not long. That is the part people underestimate about routine. You do not have to tell someone anything. If they are patient enough, you tell them everything just by repeating yourself. For most of that winter, I went to the gym before sunrise. Not because I liked mornings. I hated mornings. But I had started working the late shift at a shipping warehouse, which meant I got home too tired to work out at night. The only time I could reliably go was before work, around 5:30 or 6. So for about 4 months, 4 days a week, I drove to the same 24-hour gym on the edge of town and followed almost the same routine every time. I parked near the side entrance, scanned in, stretched by the mirrors near the free weights, and used one of the 2 treadmills at the back wall because they were usually empty and faced away from everyone else. The place was never completely empty that early, but it was quiet enough that you noticed the same people. A couple of regulars lifted before construction jobs. One woman did the stair machine every morning. There was an older guy who watched the news while pedaling a recumbent bike. And there was a man I started seeing in the stretching area. The first time I noticed him, he was standing by the rack of foam rollers while I was tying my shoe. He was not using anything. He just stood there with a gym bag over one shoulder, looking toward the treadmills. I only remembered him because when I got on the treadmill at the back wall, I caught him in the reflection of the window behind me. He was still standing in the same place. A minute later, he walked away. The second time, he was there again. Same area, same black duffel bag. This time, when I finished stretching and headed toward the back treadmills, he moved too. Not to a machine, just to the row of ellipticals behind me, where he stood for a second like he was deciding what to use. Then he left the floor entirely. After that, I started noticing a pattern. He was only there on mornings when I used the back treadmills. If I came in late and those treadmills were taken, I would use one closer to the front. On those mornings, I did not see him. But if the back wall machines were open, and I went to my usual one, there he was, somewhere near the stretching area, or the ellipticals, staying just long enough to know where I ended up. I told myself that sounded paranoid. A gym is a place where people look around. They wait for machines. They move from station to station. Then, one Tuesday morning, he spoke to me. I had just stepped off the treadmill and was wiping down the handles when he came up beside the one next to mine and said, "You always use this side?" It was such a simple sentence that at first I did not even register how strange it was. I looked at him and said, "I guess." He nodded toward the window and said, "Less people watching you here." Then he smiled slightly, like he'd made some small joke the two of us understood. I gave a polite half smile, threw my towel over my shoulder, and walked away. The comment bothered me for the rest of the day. Not because it was threatening, because it was observant. It meant he had been noticing the same thing over and over again, the same way I had been noticing him. After that, I changed my routine on purpose. I started on machines instead of stretching first. I picked different treadmills. Once I skipped cardio entirely and went straight to the cable machines. On those days, I barely saw him. Then, on a Friday, I came in at my normal time, and all the front treadmills were open, but both back ones were taken. I remember feeling relieved. I picked one near the middle, did my run, and headed into the locker room afterward to wash my face before work. When I came out, he was standing by the bulletin board outside the locker room. He looked at me and said, "You changed it up." He said it in that same casual tone, but there was something underneath it now. I said, "What?" He shrugged. "You usually go to the back first." Then he walked away before I could answer. That was the first moment I felt actual fear. Not a big, obvious fear. Just a cold tightening in my chest that told me this was no longer some vague overlap between regulars. He was paying attention to what I did when I arrived, where I went first, and whether I changed my order. I thought seriously about switching gyms after that. The only reason I did not was money. This place was close to my apartment and month to month. For about a week, I kept varying my routine. Then my locker got opened. The women's locker room was basic. A couple rows of metal lockers, showers in back, mirrors by the sinks. I always used one of the taller lockers on the end, because the middle row had a bent hinge that made them hard to shut properly. One Wednesday, I finished my workout, went into the locker room, and found my locker door slightly open. I knew I had shut it. I always checked the handle after closing it because the doors there sometimes bounced back if you did not push hard enough. Inside, nothing looked stolen. My keys were still there. My shirt was still folded on top of my bag, but the zipper on the bag had been moved from left to right. I am very specific about little things like that. I always closed it the same direction because the pull tab caught on the fabric if it faced the other way. I stood there, staring at it so long that another woman asked if I was okay. I said yes. Then I took my stuff and left without finishing my usual routine at the mirror. The next morning, he was at the gym again. This time, he was on a treadmill. Not running, just walking slowly on one of the front machines while looking at the TV above it. I almost convinced myself that was a good sign. Maybe he really was just some weird regular after all. Then I got to my car after the workout. Tucked under my driver's side wiper was a folded disinfectant wipe from the gym, still in its little plastic packet. On the outside, in blue marker, someone had written, "Wrong locker today." I did not touch it for a few seconds. I just stood there in the cold, staring at those 3 words and trying to process what they meant. That meant he had not only opened the locker, he had expected me to use a different one. He knew I normally chose the end locker, and because I had switched to the one beside it that morning, he had either opened the wrong door first or noticed the change after the fact. I left the wipe under the wiper and got in the car. I did not go back the next day, or the day after that. By Monday, I had canceled the membership online. A week later, on my way into work, I stopped at a gas station for coffee. As I came back out, I saw a black duffel bag sitting upright beside the pump at the next island. Same shape, same worn strap, same one he always carried. He was nowhere in sight, but I knew immediately whose it was. I got back in my car without the coffee and left. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe someone else owned the same black duffel. But by then, it no longer mattered whether every single thing was provable. What mattered was that someone had been studying a routine I barely thought about myself. Which entrance I used, which treadmill I preferred, which locker I usually picked, how long I spent in the locker room before leaving for work. That is the part people underestimate about places like gyms. They feel public enough to be safe. But if you go often enough, at the same times, in the same order, you stop being just another person in the room. To the wrong person, you become something much easier to map. For about 4 months, I ended every workout the exact same way. That was the part I did not think anyone would notice. I was 23, working full-time at a warehouse, and my gym routine was the only part of my week that felt consistent. I went to a local gym 5 nights a week, almost always after my shift, usually between 8:30 and 10. It was one of those places that stayed open late, but was not quite 24 hours. Big enough to have separate rooms for weights, cardio, and classes, but small enough that after a while you started recognizing the same faces. There were people I saw often enough that I mentally grouped them into categories. The older guy who wore lifting gloves for every machine, the 2 college kids who hogged the cable station and filmed each other, the woman who power walked on the treadmill while reading from a tablet. Then there was the guy I only ever noticed near the showers. The locker room at that gym was long and narrow. Lockers on one side, sinks, and mirrors on the other. And at the back, there was a tiled corridor with 4 shower stalls. The stall at the very end was the only one I ever used because it had the strongest water pressure and the curtain hook wasn't broken like the others. That was part of my routine. I would finish lifting, go into the locker room, wash my hands, change shoes, shower in the last stall, then leave in whatever clean shirt I had packed for work the next day. Same order, same stall, same time range almost every night. The first time I noticed him, I had just come out of that end shower with a towel around my waist and saw a man standing by the sinks, looking toward the back hall. He was not doing anything. No gym bag on the counter, no toothbrush, no towel over his shoulder. He just stood there for a second, then looked away and walked out of the locker room. That by itself meant nothing. Plenty of people stepped into the locker room for a second and then left. The second time, he was there again. This time, I was at the mirror drying my hair, and he came in, looked down the row of shower stalls, then checked his phone and left without using a locker or the bathroom. I only remembered him because it felt like he had walked in specifically to see which stalls were occupied. Still, I did not think much of it. What made it start to bother me was how often I saw him near the same part of the locker room. Never at the weights, never on a treadmill, never actually working out. At least, not that I noticed. Just little appearances near the back, by the sinks, at the entrance to the shower corridor. Once sitting on the bench by the lockers with no bag, no water bottle, nothing. He was maybe mid-30s, average build, short beard, dark hair, and usually wore some variation of the same plain black gym clothes. The first time he spoke to me, I had just shut off the end shower and stepped out. He was at the sink, washing his hands. Without looking up, he said, "That one finally got hot?" I stopped drying off for a second and said, "What?" He glanced at me in the mirror and nodded toward the end stall. "The water," he said. "Takes forever in that one." That was strange because it did not. That was the whole reason I used it. I just said, "Mine was fine," and kept getting dressed. He did not say anything else. But that line stayed with me because it felt like he was trying to establish that he knew my routine too. After that, I started noticing smaller things. One night, I walked into the locker room, and the end shower curtain was already pulled shut. Not unusual by itself. But when I got closer, there was no one inside. The floor was dry. The curtain had just been closed. Another night, the soap I had left on the little shelf in that stall the day before was gone. I knew exactly where I'd forgotten it, because I remembered thinking I would just use the gym's dispenser next time. The bottle never turned up in Lost and Found. Then there was the note. It was not dramatic, just a scrap torn from a paper towel with blue ink on it, folded once and left on the narrow bench directly outside the shower corridor. I found it after my workout when I went back to use the end shower. I almost ignored it because I assumed it was trash, but my eye caught one word on the outside. Late. I opened it. It said, "You're later than usual tonight." That was all. I looked around immediately. The locker room was empty. The thing about a note like that is it turns every normal detail into something else. Suddenly, the silence feels intentional. The open lockers seem like places someone could have stood a second earlier. The mirror across from you feels less like a mirror and more like something someone had been using to watch you. I stuffed the note into my pocket, showered as fast as I could, and left. I should have gone to the front desk then. Instead, I talked myself down all the way home. Maybe it was some stupid joke from one of the college kids. Maybe it was meant for somebody else. Maybe I was connecting it to that guy because I already found him weird. The next evening, I changed things up. Different arrival time, different workout order. And when I finished, I used the second shower stall instead of the one at the end. That was when I found out it was definitely about me. As I came out of the shower, the same guy was standing by the row of lockers buttoning his shirt. He looked at me, then toward the end stall, then back at me. "You switched," he said. Not a question, just a statement. I did not answer. I got dressed, grabbed my bag, and went straight to the front desk. There was only one employee there, a kid I had seen before, but did not know well. I told him some guy in the locker room had been leaving notes and making comments about my schedule. He looked uncomfortable right away and asked me to describe him. When I did, he frowned. Then he said, "That guy doesn't have an active membership anymore." I asked what he meant. He pulled up something on the computer and said the man had canceled 3 weeks earlier, but someone had been letting him in at the side entrance near the training room. He thought maybe it was an oversight because the guy used to come with a friend who still had a valid tag. That part got under my skin more than anything else. It meant he had kept coming even after he stopped belonging there. The employee said he would tell the manager. I asked if there were cameras in the locker room hallway. He said only outside the entrance, not inside. The next night, I drove to the gym parking lot and sat there for almost 5 minutes before turning around and leaving. I never went back. A week later, I stopped by in the daytime to cancel the rest of my prepaid training sessions, and the manager told me they had banned the man after another complaint from someone in the men's locker room. He did not give details, and I did not ask. I did ask one thing: whether the man had ever actually worked out there before. The manager said, "Not much. Mostly checked in late and stayed in the locker room." That was the worst part for me. Not that he had noticed my routine, that he had one of his own, and it centered on being in the exact place where mine always ended.